Week, another podcast. Welcome back, everyone. My name's Mikko, and joining us today will be Wendy and Howard from the office. We're going to be covering a couple of the topics from this week's developments, a little bit of what we're looking forward to ahead, and we'll probably be covering a few interesting topics that have been coming up in sort of the public consciousness in the last, I'd say, several weeks, probably a couple months even. But anyways, I guess before we get to all that, Howard, how is everything this week? How is everything with you guys over at New York?
It's been good. It's been definitely hectic. We have a lot of production planning happening for the new projects. So in the horror game, a lot of it is about, it's a continuing conversation about, what is the core message of the game? What is the game about? Like, what does the game stand for? Like, what do we want to say as developers through this game? So for example, with Guns of Icarus, we wanted to make a statement about teamwork, right?
Yep.
And, with Amsterdam, it's, in large part about, sort of this resistance, fighting against oppression, the David versus Goliath type of story.
So this is like a philosophical
Exactly. Yeah. So I think with this game is in particular, because it's like pretty experimental, like we want to do a little bit of soul searching and ask ourselves why we're doing this, why we're making this game. What is it about? What resonate with us and whatever, right? Like, what is the reason for existence for this game? And so like we actually, all over a 2-week span while we're developing, levels and mechanics and whatnot, we also did a lot of that, and that is basically spelled out very clearly now. And so from that, we then re-examine what the setting for the game would be, and we actually got that sorted out this week as well. And it's pretty. I'm really excited. It's going to be a bit out there. So yeah, I'm actually really excited about the process. It's been a really fun process. The subject, but I think it's also like intriguing. Something that I'm like really excited about. And so with the fire project, it's actually been pretty fun. It's working on different materials and the properties and how fire propagates, and the core water jet meets fire type of that frantic oppressive type of mechanic, that type of engagement is like coming out a little bit more. So the next week we're actually going to be so we added some like levels, just like goals, and so we designed a mission, a couple of different mission types, and we're gonna do some just play tests and see like crudely how that feels. So and then Alex's project is like more developed, and now it's like kind of going back to sort of the crafting part, and try to bring that up. So yeah, there's like quite a bit of stuff going on. And then so with Guns, the work is pretty much it's mostly wrapped up in parts, like for it's we have the content ready, just about ready for release, in the first of next month, right? And then the PS stuff is largely squared away. So we're just kind of waiting for the announcement, the pre-order, and roll from there.
Actually touching on that a little bit, I know I've gotten a couple of questions, if there's going to be a lot more of the Steam Workshop items that are entered, and I know for certain, there's going to be a lot of them actually.
So in this upcoming build, there will be quite
a few. Yeah, it was quite a list that Tim pulled out. It was really nice to see all that too. So I know some people have recommended to us what they'd like to see in the game. So we took a really close look at it. I made sure that you guys got all that to the art team, and they really chose a whole handful of them. So we'll be expecting a lot more player created content in this next update. But we do have more content kind of planned out to be spaced over a little bit of time, but there's going to be more as it goes on. So, even if there's a lot of player content, there's actually still more from us as well coming in the next few months here. So, keep an eye out for that. And that's sort of where we're at with that kind of that front there as well. So Howard, we were just talking off stream prior, and I was kind of intrigued from your angle on it, because here in Europe, totally different culture, different kind of perspective on things, and it's kind of useful for a lot of players too to kind of get insights, because maybe there's a lot of different viewpoints on these matters. But you mentioned how you were approached by someone, because obviously the gun issue in the States is pretty big, hot topic nowadays, and sometimes players make, or I guess I wouldn't say players necessarily, it'd be anyone really that could make that equation of violent games to real life. And you were approached about this. You want to tell us a little bit more about this experience and what came out of that?
Yeah, I mean, it's just like, I think I'm getting asked, because I mean, well, like sometimes in like tech, whatever. I mean, people like, just not everybody in tech is a gamer, right? So like, I think in game development, in like say different like app development or tech, whatever, like people like some of them are, but some of them are not, right? They have nothing to do with gaming. So when like, yes, I mean, after the latest like school shooting, mass school shooting, obviously like in the US, I think are boiling over a bit, and there's like massive student protests and whatnot. So this topic is like
it's quite big in the States.
Brought to the forefront, especially when now politicians, the White House are like linking gun violence to video game playing, and they have a summit about like, and there's just like these like some of these like anti video game activists and whatever.
It's basically old men
a few like big studio execs, whatever. They're just like, well, ESRB, blah blah, and they're just like essentially stigmatizing video game playing because they think that it extends to gun violence. Yeah. I mean, knowing like our player base and knowing like it's just fucking bullshit. Like, sorry, excuse me.
Fair enough.
It's really upsetting, right? Like, it's really upsetting from a lot of fronts, right? Because it's like, it seems like it is the easy. I mean, especially we make a game and it's called Guns of Icarus and whatnot. So yeah, I mean, I do get asked, but like, look, I mean, when we are rated by the ESRB, like we barely get a teen rating. Like, like if it was just like even a little bit less violent, whatever, right? Like we would not even be we won't even be a teen rating. Like we would probably get like a PG rating. And
it's probably a fair assessment to say that games, like the whole industry, it's quite a multifaceted, like there's so many different faces, there's so many different companies and movements and functions, entertainment of all kinds that stem from it or is connected to it in some way, and it's kind of this big amorphous thing. And
so like on the,
but it's so easy to point a finger and say, well, that's the problem. Would you agree with that? Like, is that, or is there more nuanced things you've noticed that from this this discussion that we've
well, so I have obviously my personal views on this, right? It's because given that I've spent some time in Asia and whatnot, like I have my take on this. So, but I would just say, okay, in terms of gun violence in video games, right? Like the data, like there is no data or like no statistical study to suggest that any of these like shooting or like violent crime, like the mass shooting and whatnot is correlated in any way with video games. Like I'm just and then like so there's a they look at statistics like the like basically like say the recent mass shooter doing the mass shooting, only 20% of them even play video games. Right,
so,
like the meaning, like they don't even play. So, meaning that the vast majority of the people who commit these like crimes, they don't even play video games at all.
So that's actually interesting you mentioned that because, I've come across articles about the military, in particular the United States, but I've seen it in France and England as well, utilizing similar settings in a virtual environment, much like the kind of games that we play, like Modern Warfare and Call of Duty, those things.
Sure.
Where they simulate these environments, these settings of an actual, maybe close quarters combat or different settings that we've seen in some of the recent conflicts in the past couple of decades for training. And would it be, arguably, I would say they're kind of one and the same thing if you think about it in a much broader way, right?
Yeah,
like,
because
it is
training
a virtual environment,
is situational reaction, right? It's
Right.
like knowing what it's about, decision making. It's about reaction. It's about it's almost like you are playing a flight sim, right? Like you're a pilot, you're using flight sim, whatever. It's just basically to learn the situation with real physics and whatnot, right? There is a line, like it's not like the soldiers all of a sudden they're playing video games and they go out and like they just started like disobey like rules of engagement and just start going buck wild and like they're just like all of a sudden like randomly shooting people. Like
that but if the lines are blurred, that certainly does draw some interesting discussions from that.
See, the thing is like line is actually not that blurred. Like that's the thing.
You think so?
Is that no one? No, I mean I don't think people, at least not at the moment. Eventually, in the future, the line will be more blurred. Yes, especially when like human consciousness in like.
When you like submitting like go beyond like 3D.
Right. Not
goggles, like
not now. Like if people still have like control of their consciousness, like whatever. Not at this present moment, right? Like people, there's really no. I mean, you don't play like a PUBG or like you don't play guns, and all of a sudden you feel like, oh yeah, there's airship everywhere. I'm just gonna. Well, where's my turret gun? I'm gonna go out and like
there's two things to say to that. I think
like, oh, it's just my.
There's two
things. Carry this around with me everywhere. You never know.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like, it's like yes. I mean, you might get adrenaline spike, endorphin spike, no question, right? It is stimulating. Like sometimes I shake when I play like shooters, when I play guns, even like like you get stimulated. There's no question.
Yeah, that suspense.
But between that level of stimulation to like, doing something, it's like, oh yeah, that it empowers me to like go buck wild and like to whatever. I mean, no, I mean it's like if that was going to be the case for that individual, like video game, it's not going to be like video game that somehow like goes from non-trigger to trigger.
Okay, but there's also a difference on how these like there's two like very specific things that you forget to mention. First of all, Guns of Icarus doesn't have any direct human-to-human violence. It is ship-to-ship violence, right? So it's there's no blood, there's no gore, there's nothing that people like would associate that with killing. I think it's more that a ship sinks basically, and also the killing animation is quite like it's more like the ship is falling apart. It's not like it's going down in flames that much. And the other thing is the way that the military utilizes video games in their programs and simulations is to actively train something that wouldn't, this kind of like connection in your brain would never in the first place happen if you weren't using it to specifically desensitize yourself with gross imaging.
These are valid points. Yeah, these are valid
cognitively it's a completely different universe that you're putting yourself to, and it is retraining your brain actively. It's not happening on a passive level.
Yeah. So
I think another thing I want to say is like, what is the like? Well, I mean, I don't know what the gun control, situation is in like say Norway, right?
Okay.
But I can speak. I've spent time. I lived in Asia, right? And I can speak about like East Asian countries. There are very, very, very strict gun control. Right, like it's like you technically can own a gun, but to own a gun, like the kind of registration check and for the government monitoring and whatnot, like the loops that you have to go through to owning a gun is like it's not impossible, but it's like it is hardcore. Like people generally just don't own guns. All right. And the penalty for owning guns and whatnot, and for illegally, right, it is very severe.
Oh yeah.
Right? In some countries there are death penalties. Okay. And so generally, I mean, we could debate that, like, whether that's
the end of time,
right.
yeah.
But still, I mean, the fact of the matter is that, like, that's the reality in Asian countries. And the fact of the matter is that, like, in generally people in Asian countries, they don't own firearms, right? And so, like, are there illegal firearms, like, owned by, like, criminals? Absolutely. However, because the penalty is so great that they don't generally, like, use firearms, like, because, like, if you're caught, say for instance, if you just, like, walk down the street and you get, like, searched or whatever, right, and you're caught with a firearm as a criminal, right, as a low, you could be facing the death penalty. It is that severe. So, like, in Taiwan, for example, and so, like, people generally don't, unless you have unless you want to rob, you're planning a bank robbery, generally people don't risk it, right? And so, like, so with that, I guess the point is that, like, okay, fine, to some extent, this is not, like, subjective, nothing to do with politics. I mean, I don't belong to a political party, whatever, but it is about guns, right? Because, like, why would I say that? Because statistically, like, I look at, like, statistical studies, look at regression analysis that different non-politics, like, the people who have no affiliation to politics have done, right? Is that, yes, there is a correlation between, lethal crime, like violent crime, and, basically, like, crimes that ends in death, right? And per capita gun ownership.
Okay, but bringing this back to games itself as a psychological impact, let's take horror games, because we are working on one as it is. One could say that there is sort of there's an impact to being desensitized to perhaps disturbing, content, as it may be. Like, we see this all the time in horror games, or in, I don't know, any kind of theme you can pick from. There's a lot of different themes that we can touch on that, in a way, someone from, say, maybe 1950s may not be accustomed to seeing today in the same way. It's sort of like with movies, TV shows, things like that. The themes that are covered have been much more, like, broadened in that context. Do you think that would have an impact as well in the way?
So no, because, okay, so I would say no, and the reason why, like, it's not a personal opinion thing, right? It is, once again, just a data thing. So the reason why I talk about this is that, like, is that, so in Asian countries, right, there is actually more exposure to violent video games. Okay, or that exposure is definitely not less. Absolutely not less. Yeah. However, do you see? Is there, like, instances of, like, violent crime committed? Yes, but on a per capita basis, it's significantly less. Especially gun crime. There's virtually no gun related, like, type of, like, there's no mass shooting in Asia, okay? Like, there's just none. Like, there are, like, knife crimes, like stabbing in public where multiple people can die, but we're really talking about, like, 2 or 3. Like, that's, like, the amount of casualty count, like, generally, right? Like, I mean, this is not a anecdotal thing, it's a statistic thing, it's a data thing. So same exposure to violent video games, vastly different outcome.
Is it possible that games could be used as a medium in a different platform? Let's take someone in these scenarios, for example. They may not necessarily use the medium of video games as a platform for inspiration to what they do, but perhaps as sort of a remedy to the state of mind they're in or what they're feeling, but eventually falling short of that, that need or expectation, and perhaps leading to some kind of event like this, like sort of an escapist approach. If someone's playing a lot of video games to avoid real life, maybe people in desperate situations. Perhaps, I'm not sure. I don't know all the people that get involved in these kinds of instances, but let's say that contributes to part of that
I mean, it's all possible, right? It's all possible, and I mean, they're just because like, oh, you know, there is not like statistically speaking, like whatever. I mean, there can be an individual who can claim that, oh, you know, that inspired me to commit a crime. It is absolutely possible, but just because that is possible, it doesn't necessarily mean that video games should be stigmatized over anything else. Because because that broad correlation doesn't exist, first of all. And second of all, people in other circumstances, in other situations, can be exposed to the same amount of violence in video games, if not more. But the outcome, you know, of their actions are vastly different.
Oh yeah.
Gotcha.
And so that's my point. Is that so? Yeah. Right. So it's like, dude, there's if that is the case, then logically speaking, there should be other forces at work here. Yeah. And I'm sorry, like, you know, I mean, it's not like we Second Amendment. Yeah, sure, fine. You know, people want to own guns to go shooting or whatever. I mean, I've shot shotguns. I mean, I've gone with like Marines and stuff. I've gone with Green Berets actually, to, you know, shoot, you know, whatever, right? Like shotguns, handgun, rifles, any, like, I mean, I actually, like I know how to handle a gun. However, it's fun. However, going from that to like, I mean, the mass proliferation of guns, yeah, I mean, it's going to have an impact, right? I mean, I think to, you know, politics aside, yeah, I mean, it's
a complicated issue.
Yeah, I mean, it's a complicated issue, absolutely, because, you know, because politics and whatever. But yes, I mean, just like the more guns that we own, yes, things can go wrong. I mean, that's not just like me anecdotally. We can debate anecdotals all we want, but I mean, based on statistics, it does actually bear out.
So it's fair to say that games are not necessarily the cause for these problems, but it certainly can stimulate a conversation about topics like these. Wouldn't that be fair to say?
Yeah, I mean, I think that,
like, well, in an artistic way, right? A game, just like a painting, can send a message. Like you were talking about this with previous conversations on some of the themes in our games, teamwork or the story, the theme that we were focusing on. A game could equally have the same powerful message. Even though it may not necessarily stimulate these acts, it could raise a conversation, awareness, or whatever it may be, to, you know, bring it to light, perhaps.
Yeah. I mean, I think definitely. I think as long as the conversation, right, or the message is informed,
sure,
right? Like, yeah. I think what I get annoyed by is like, you know, people, politicians, or, you know, maybe, right, they don't understand what they don't know, right? And then instead of like doing some fact finding, and to engage in a conversation in a constructive or logical or reasonable way with data, you know, they just basically just sort of like espouse a view and stigmatize something, and then get on ever and just start to like stigmatize thing and propagate bullshit.
Right. So this has certainly been a pretty like insightful discussion, and it is obviously not one of these that can be settled very easily, because it can be talked on end for hours and hours. But I did want to mention, as this
it's not like I feel like some like, oh, do I feel like sometimes you know, the level of violence in some, or the level of gore in some games is like a bit over the top? Yes. Because like I think sometimes they're done in a very gratuitous or like in a marketing way, because I think that some people think that like, oh, okay, you know, just spill more, but shock value and just make more money and whatever, right? Like,
well, that happens in movies and things like that too. You know, you have news articles that do the same thing. You know, it's anything to draw the attention of the eye. It's I think that's a different form of attractiveness. It's sort of like a conceptual design in the medium that you're working with. to get your attention, you know. So, but
I guess, I mean, it's like, you know,
yeah, it can be.
like Quentin Tarantino's like films, whatever, they're like blood spewing everywhere and whatever, right? Like, and it's like, why are we not talking about that? You know?
Because it's just deranging and a distraction. Like, just making me see violence is not gonna make me commit violence. I think that's the point.
I know. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot of interesting ways that whether you're in film or in games or writing books or producing TV shows, there's a lot of different ways that people can convey violence or, you know, disturbing material, but in a very interesting manner. I mean, you could take things from Schindler's List, for example, has a lot of great, you know, little nuggets as far as like the theme of this. And of course, there's a lot of other films that do the same thing, but you know, it's just the matter of presentation. And again, the bottom line, even if there may be a message in a lot of these movies, the bottom line is entertainment. You know, it's as harmless as it sounds. It's not designed to be, you know, to to trigger anything necessarily. It may be a consequence of it, perhaps, but games in and of itself, especially, are platforms to enjoy yourself, you know. So anyways, I just wanted to mention real quick that we are going to be having a few events over the weekends. I want to remind everyone that we do have the Iron Fork of Friday coming up an hour after this podcast when you see the recording. Yep. And last week, I was actually making an attendance to the Saturday Chaos Skirmish, and it turns out it was their 100th game. So congratulations to you guys. That's pretty awesome.
Congratulations, Chaos.
Yeah, it's pretty great. So if you guys want to join in on the 101st version, join in on this Saturday. There's a lot of great themes, and I've played a couple of them. It's really, I mean, it literally is in the name, Chaos. It's great. It's fun. It's good fun. And there's a great participation too. I mean, there's a lot of players from all, you know, walks of life. So you can really get to meet quite a few people. Maybe make some new friends too. It's a great place to do it. I know that the Sunday Community Skirmish, which is coming up on, of course, Sunday, which is a team-based sort of event, I think they're reaching somewhere pretty close to their 200th week, which is pretty impressive as well. Like, some of these games have been around since, these like events have been around since the very beginning, or at least like not long from the very beginning of Guns of Icarus's public availability. So, you know, they're getting up there now. It's pretty awesome. But yeah, we'll have to see if there's something special that can be done for these events, because these are pretty great like milestones for these groups, you know. So. And of course, on Monday there is the Munker Madness mining madness.
Lots of M's. Munker,
yes,
Monday Munker Madness.
Yeah, it's something like that with a lot of mines. Definitely up your alley if you like to blow things up with mines. So
mines
check that out.
No friends.
Yeah, but yeah, join us then for, you know, some of those events. And if you still want to, like, you know, join us directly as developers, we are also going to be featuring the dev games every Tuesday and Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern, which is, oh right, the time zone changes. So I think it's 10 p.m. UTC. Is that correct, Wendy?
Oh, what? Sorry. Oh no, time zones.
Yeah, time zones. They've been changed because North America's changed
to daylight savings, while Europe has not yet. We are changing on the 25th.
Yeah, I understand that the Australians have also changed. So they don't change at all. They just
do their own thing down there.
Yeah.
They sort themselves out. So.
Yeah, it's kind of weird. Yeah, but yeah, so you can join us then. We're going to do our best to keep everything updated so you guys get the accurate times, but be aware that the time zone changes are going to follow Muse times. So when you see any official Muse events, be aware that you're going to be following whatever the Eastern time for that event is happening, and that will be 5 p.m.
Well-timed body is your friend.
Yes. So on that note, thank you all, everyone, for joining us for this pretty animated discussion of a couple different topics. And join us next week. We're going to be covering a few more other areas of interesting thought and discussion, as well as some of the development highlights and updates being going on with some of these projects we have going on, and a few more announcements we'll be hosting in the future. So stay tuned, check it out, and yeah, join us when you can in the games. So on that note, guys.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure how much trouble I just got myself into. Right? But
you never know.
But look. I mean, basically, what I wanted to say was that, look, I mean, there are, this country who enjoy owning guns. Okay, fine. So be it. it's cool, whatever. I mean, whether people own it for sport, for fun, because they need to go hunting for food, or for self. I mean, there could be any number of reasons. But I do think that, in this country anyway, there can be a better balance, right? There can be a better medium, where there probably needs to be a little bit more oversight, and video games cannot be a distraction that stop people from like sensibly talking about this, and to try to improve the situation. Down the street, it's like, oh shit, I mean, I can get shot, right? Like, nobody wants that. So
sure,
like nobody wants to go to Vegas and stuff, and just like all of a sudden just like bullets flying everywhere. I mean, it's like, oh yeah, how likely is that? Well, shit, I didn't. The odd chance, like, nobody wants that to happen.
Yeah, and everyone has the right to be safe.
Yeah, and this is obviously a very passionate topic for a lot of people, and we understand that. So, of course, we respect people.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's
these
also
are just
like,
topics to cover
right now. There's yeah, exactly. Right now, it's also like people just like are drawing lines in the sand. Just like, dude, this is my trench, that's your trench.
Guns of Icarus is
I'm a gun owner. I'm a gun control person.
Sure.
F you, and whatever, right? And I think the conversation stops. So,
well, either way, everyone out there, stay safe, keep it real, enjoy Guns of Icarus when you feel like it, and hopefully we'll see you guys in next week's games. So on that note, thank you for joining us, and hope to see you then. Take care, guys. Have a good weekend.
Bye.
Later.